Well, we've had our first snow of the year. Well, it was never going to last forever. Well, welcome to a fine Scottish winter. Driving rain and pissing sleet. This week, in Reviving an Idler, we're going to be getting the shed completed, put a new tarp back on top of it, getting it all squared away, and hopefully we'll get a couple of ribs put into the boat. Now, I apologise for the delay in the uploads. In this COVID world that we live in, the unthinkable happened. I actually had to go to work, so I've been busy with my real job. Hopefully that's not going to be delaying the project too much, but it has knocked me back about a week. So playing catch up a little bit, we'll get this video out as soon as possible to you guys. Thanks for watching and please stay tuned. Well, the boat shed is proving to be a little bit of a bone of contention. It's quite difficult to get something that is structurally stable enough and strong enough to withstand some of the weather we get up here. The main enemy is the wind. We also have heavy dumps of rain and snow, and the plastic tarpaulin roofs simply are not designed to take that kind of a beating. So I've had to sort of come up with some different schemes and ideas and trials to sort of try and see how I can improve the design while still keeping it cheap enough and light enough that I can take the tarp off when the time comes, take the shed down when the time comes, sorry, and remove the boat. Also allow me to take the tarp off occasionally from time to time as well to get access with larger bits of wood or whatever. One of the first ideas I'd had following the dump of snow was I would build sort of a ridge pole. So this heavy goalpost structure here, and I would simply drape a tarp over the top and it would be tent pegged into the ground. The idea behind that would be that it would be steep sided enough that any heavy snow dumps, any kind of heavy rain, etc. would just simply shed off the sides and we wouldn't have an issue with putting too much weight on top of the roof. It would be pegged in, so that if there was any big storms coming in or anything, I'd be able to simply remove the pegs, wrap the tarp up nice and tight round the boat, and again that would sort of protect its integrity a little bit. I quickly learned that that wouldn't really work. The tarp was stretched over the top of the boat for a short period of time, and simply it just flapped around so wildly in the wind that it was ripping the grommets out and ripping all the fixings out and just simply demolishing the tarp. So this is our fourth one I think we're going to try with. There's another one on its way. So I'm having to beef up the construction a little bit. So the most recent design is the one we've got here, version 1.3. And as I'm still using the big ridgepole idea, and that is the main load-bearing part of the shed. It is fixed with good solid beams into the solid wood workshop anyway, so there's some structural strength there. Recycling some of the old wood, and I'm making it stronger, a better design along the sides. And I'm putting some solid rafters in along the side here, and that will then attach the tarp to that. Borrowing idea from version 1.1, and that is I will then fix the tarp down with battens screwed along its length, and then they will hold the tarp in place so that when it does inevitably flex, it's only flexing and moving over a small span, not the whole length of the shed. So as you probably all know, at the end of a tarpaulin you have a series of eyelets and grommets put in there, and conventional wisdom is that you thread a bit of string and you tie your tarp down. Sounds all good, but in practice these grommets are very, very weak and they very easily pull out of the fabric. So what I did on the last tarp quite successfully was I basically screwed it to a batten, but just nails alone or screws into a batten, you're left with more or less the same issue. You have a little weak point along the line where it concentrates the force on the pull, and it will eventually pull out as well. What I did to overcome that was I simply used 2 bits of wood and I sandwiched it, so it was the compressive force between this batten and this batten screwed together, forcing down on top of this, and it held it like a clamp, and that basically spread the load very evenly along the whole length of the batten and gave me a very, very solid build. And I even found, trying to take the tarp down, trying to take this last shed down, it was very, very solid. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing again. It is going to be double layered. I've got my tarp that I've got just now, which has a few holes in it, so I'll be putting that back over the top, screwing all that down, nailing it down, and then when the next one arrives, whenever that is, I'll put it over the top of the other one. And what that gives me is it gives me a, I'm going to call a wear barrier, so it allows the new tarp just to rub over the top of the old one rather than catching on any rough edges and a bit of wood or any pokey nails or anything like that. So hopefully it prolongs the life of the tarp as well. So fingers crossed, this is the last shed that we have to build. I will then use all the offcuts from the rest of the tarps that I've had. I will fence in all along the sides and the gable ends as well, and all together hopefully have a sort of drier, more stable environment to work in. So slightly more structurally sound. It's about as much as I'm going to get done today. I have to get to the lumber yard and get some screws and some more wood tomorrow. Got some planking on the outside of the tarp just to try and keep it down against the wind. But now it's going to be a lot more solid after all. Well, I guess the wind wasn't too keen on having all that stuff on the roof. Now these battens are all going lengthways along the shed. They have a very important role, and that is to stop the tarp from sagging. Sagging tarp collects water and allows the water then to get heavy, build up little pools, and that pulls the tarp down, creating weak spots and creating tension on the planking. So admittedly the planking is running this way, so that is going to create a little hollow in there, so we'll get little collections of water, but hopefully the support that's going to give them is not going to allow anything big to build up, and it also means I don't have to put any extra posts going that way across the apex. So it's a little bit of a hybrid structure. So we've got these joists going off the workshop, and they go up to support this apex beam, or this sort of central goal post, if you like, this ridge pole. That's the main structural element. Hanging off that, solid bracing into the shed, and that gives this side is really, really solid. Coming off this, we've got the joists that run down onto this side. This side is made of all the recycled wood, and it's not nearly strong enough to do the job by itself, so it's all kind of sistered together, screwed, well, basically two pieces screwed together to thicken it up and make it a little bit more substantial. It's still pretty solid considering what it's made of, and there'll be some braces going at the sides, and also I'll be bracing up along the whole length of this side as well, so it will all firm up quite a lot. At the ends I'll be putting again more bracing in between, basically filling the gaps with planking or whatever I've got left, offcuts and random bits of wood, and then I'll cover that in the tarpaulin and tack that all in position, and hopefully we should be left with something that's a lot more solid than we had before. Still just as easy to remove and just as light, because light's obviously an issue here. It's Scotland and it doesn't get light till about 9 o'clock, and it's dark by about 3 at the moment, so we need as much daylight as we can get. That's why I'm keen to keep going with the tarps just now as well. Well, that's a wee bit better, and just in nick of time for the rain. Good tension in the tarp, so it should be pretty solid. Let's get a wee wobble, see what happens. Yeah, I'm not getting any real movement there. Yeah, not very much at all. So by the time I get some extra planking along this side here, and just brace up all the way down there and get both gable ends fully planked up, I don't think this is going to be going anywhere anytime soon. Even if it takes on a pile of water or a pile of snow, it's still going to be pretty solid, I think. So, superb. So it's a wee bit more stable. I've used a lot of random bits of wood that I had lying around, so it's starting to look a little bit more like an actual shed. There's the side. It's all rolled up just now because I've still got that second bit of tarp to go over the top whenever that arrives. But enough boring shed stuff. Let's get some ribs in the boat. So what we're simply doing here is we are cutting around the plugs at the back using a Forstner bit just to open up the hole, so that when we hammer the nails back through the plank, the head of the nail doesn't simply grip the edge of the planking and rip out the back of the grain. Sort of what we're seeing here. So when this nail came back out, it just happened to catch the edge of the grain on the edge of that hole and lifted that wee piece out and obviously broke it off. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to eliminate all the damage from this, but we might be able to mitigate some of it. So as long as I sort of drill at the backs of it, we can try and keep the planking as nice and clean as possible, so we don't have to do any kind of filling later on. So that's an example of one of the fastenings that we're taking out of the boat at the moment. These are the plank fastenings. So you can see it's quite significant corrosion going on there, and that's more likely to be the thickness of the nail, or close to the thickness of the nail when it was originally put in. You can see we've got quite a lot of thinning here.
by comparison. So even if we weren't having to replace all the ribs, you know, if I'd pulled one of these fasteners, I wouldn't have had confidence in the rest of the boats. I'd be looking at replacing them anyway. So it's nice to know that even though we're replacing one thing, we're actually significantly increasing the strength of the rest of the boat, and you're replacing all its fasteners as we go anyway. So that's good to know. It's good to see.
Back with the scraping.
Now, one of the things I've been asked is, how do I know that the boat's been heavily oiled in the past? And it's actually quite simple, it's quite straightforward. There's very clear colour differences in the wood. There's also what looks like a tarry, oily substance underneath any paint that is in existence. It's not been painted. You can quite clearly see an oil build-up. I'll show you, for example. Right, so in this area here, I've just started scraping this for the rib installing. And if you look just about here, you see this is a sort of your standard wood coloured, you know, sort of your pine underneath. Now, but the actual planking itself looks almost scorched, it looks blackened. Now, I believe that is due to a chemical change in linseed oils, and especially if they're built up with pine tars and stuff as well, boat soup effectively, you get this sort of aging, this blackening over time. And if you go back to it and scratch, it's not on the surface, although you can eventually scrape back to get to this kind of wood, but it's a really thick layer. If I then apply some heat to a bit of paint, you'll see liquefying on top of the wood. If I do it over here again, you get this boiling appearance in the wood, and that's the oils themselves simply bubbling out of the woodwork. Spray, and you see that the paint just lifts clean off and leaves exactly the same film below. So that has basically been painted straight onto oil that has formed a hard layer. As soon as you melt it, that hard layer simply lifts off and you're left with clean wood underneath. Another thing which is very clear is the smell. See, when you apply heat to this and you scratch it, you've got a very strong old wooden boat pine tar smell that comes from it. It's this really turpentine-y, I don't have the right words to describe it, but it's, you know, it's a very clear, oily, old boat smell. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, really. And if you look at it, it's blackening, the whole boat's blackened, the whole boat has been stained at some point, minus a couple of newer planks. Okay, so we've got the steamer all set up for tomorrow. It's the PVC pipe that we've seen before. It's all wrapped in carpet. That's going to insulate it a little bit against the cold. It is pretty cold just now. It's between 1 and 5 degrees Celsius, so you know, temperatures are pretty low. Got some wood tied underneath it. That's just simply going to stop it, so as the heat warms up the PVC, it doesn't warp and bend unnecessarily. Keep it nice and straight. It's all clamped to the beams, so it can't roll around and fall off the boat as I'm pulling the rib stock in and out. Finally, we have the steamer, and it's just your wallpaper steamer, nothing fancy, and that is hooked up to the power and running through this hose all the way to the bottom. It is that's the steam pipe. Now, the steamer is set up on a gentle gradient, an upward slope, so that the steam can enter at the bottom, percolate its way up through the pipe and escape out of this end here. And there's a small hole drilled in the very bottom of the pipe at the back, and that will allow any water gathering in there just to dribble out the bottom. Closing it up, I can either stuff a rag in the end here, or I'm actually going to try just simply folding over the carpet here and clamping it. That will allow any pressurised steam to escape, but keep the cosy, hot, wet air trapped inside. So fingers crossed, all going well, we'll be installing some ribs tomorrow. Well, good morning. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas and I hope you're looking forward to a fantastic new year. We are just about, hopefully, to go and steam a rib. So it's first thing in the morning, it's about 7 AM, no, tell you a lie, it's about 8 AM just now. It's about ballpark -4, 3, something like that. So everything's frozen. So the whole steaming operation is going to be a little bit slower today. I was hoping to put in a batch and try and put at least 2 ribs in today. I'm going to start with 1, see how we get on. I may not even be able to get it up to temperature. We'll just have to play it by ear and just see how it goes. But steamer's on just now. We've just hit go. Give it a chance to warm up. Give it a chance to warm the pipe up. We'll throw the stick in and we'll give it. It should be an hour, but I'm going to give it maybe an hour and 10 just to compensate for the weather, maybe an hour and 20, just see how things look as it takes it out, and take it from there. So in the meantime, while that's warming up, I'm just going to quickly show you my bedding compound, and I'll show you how I'm cutting the ends of the rib stock to fit into the pockets. Now you should really be able to get a good enough join between the size of the rib stock and the holes that we've got to accommodate them. We are going to struggle a little bit because we've actually, the boat's obviously old, and certain parts of the holes have actually crumbled and worn away. There's different depths of corrosion, and nothing's quite flush and square as it would be when you cut a pocket to fit something. So I can't cut a stock size of ribs and then just sort of make them all fit. Each one's going to have to be custom made. So I'm going to try with these first 2 pockets the compound, and see if this bedding compound seals up any kind of real issues and makes it look okay. If it's looking like it's not going to be, or if there's too much space basically, if I'm basically relying on compound to keep the water out of that joint, then we're really not doing a very good job, and we should really rethink what I'm trying to do here. But I'll try it with these 2, see how it comes out, and if it looks like it's doing alright and it looks like it's doing a good job, we'll just keep carrying on. Remember, I'm going to be dropping the keel out of here as well, so I don't want everything to be jammed up tight either, because I do actually want to be able to drop the keel instead of actually basically cutting it out. So I also don't want to make it too perfect, but at the moment it's going to be far from perfect. It's going to be fitted into the compound, and hopefully it's going to be snug enough that the compound is just taking that that last feather gap out of it. So that's what we're aiming for. Yeah, see how it goes. So hopefully you can still hear me over the sound of the steamer bubbling away there. Now, I've made up a wee sealing compound, a wee bedding compound last night, and it's made up of nice thick pine tar, red lead powder, some linseed oil, and some chalk just to give it some consistency. At the time I put this in, I've actually just cut it out of the pockets, but when I put this in last night, it was really soft and malleable, and it worked really well. It looked quite a lot like dolphinite actually, but overnight it has frozen and become very brittle, like a dark chocolate almost. And there's no way I'd be able to push a rib into that and have it squish out around the side. And if it's working over time and moving, it's simply, there's no giving it whatsoever, so it's really brittle. So I've just had to cut that out of the pockets just now, and I've mixed up another one. So this is slightly simpler. So it's simply linseed oil, red lead powder, and a little bit of chalk just to thicken it up a little bit. I'm going to paste that into the rib pockets, and I may even paste a little bit on the bottom of the rib before I actually put them in, and that basically allows me to protect the hole with oil. And there's also the red lead in there, which is a poison which will hopefully inhibit any kind of biological growth, any kind of rot forming in these pockets. If any gap remains as the boat moves or anything like that, I'll be able to seal that laterally with bitumen, or even just poking in some pine tar and boat soup into these holes, and that will fill up the gaps, I think, sufficiently. I do have a slight predicament in that I'm loath to remove these bilge stringers because they're still actually providing quite a lot of support to the boat until I've actually got some good solid ribs back in. So that makes dry fitting the ribs quite difficult. So the only template I've got is the old rib that came out of the pocket, and I can use the bottom of that to actually cut the end of the rib stock to make sure it fits. However, it's not going to be a perfect, it's not going to be perfect sort of, like feather fine. Added to that the plan is still to drop the keel out of the boat anyway. So if we've dropped the keel out of the boat and had to replace the keel, which is still a fair chance I'm going to have to do that, I'll have to cut new pockets to accommodate these ribs anyway. So I'm kind of in a sticky wicket. I can go one way, which may impact the other, or I can just kind of go sort of straight down the middle, and I'm erring on the side of going straight down the middle. I've got a good template of what the ribs should be, so I've cut the end of the rib stock to match, and they should fit snugly into these pockets. I don't think it's going to be a major issue, but it's something I've had to bear in mind as well. In goes the first rib. Okay. Getting wee icicles forming off the condensation. Okay, let's go for it. Speed, speed, speed. Ah! So, had to quickly get this out again so that I can re-steam it. See, we had a drain run out, unfortunately. Thought that was going to be okay as well. Oh well. We'll wait for him to do the next one in a minute. Okay folks, let's try it again. Oh, damn it.
Okay, pretty good. Happy with that. Okay, yeah, so that went in not bad. Had a little bit of a problem when I first pushed it in. The actual rib jammed itself in there, so it didn't flow like a spaghetti strip like I'd hoped. It just got wedged in there, and then the end result was I started hitting the top of the tarp, so I couldn't force it without risk of putting a hole. Probably have put a hole. Yeah, there's a tiny little scratch there as well. So. But that doesn't matter, we're putting another tarp over the top of that anyway, so that's not a big deal just now. Excellent! First rib in, yahoo! Well, that's all I've got time for this week. You've been waiting patiently long enough for this video to come out, so I'll get this edited and online as quickly as I can. Future work to be done is we've got the nails and the rows to be done on the rib that we've just installed. We have the remaining 3 ribs to steam and put into the boat, so we'll hopefully get those done in the next couple of days, and that will probably form the bulk of the next video. And then moving on from that, once we've got a bit of stability midsection, I'll be looking to take out one of the sawn frames and use that as a template to make the next ones that go in there. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe as usual, tell all your mates, and thanks for continuing to follow my adventure. Bye for now.